right, you ready, Trev? It's rolling. All right, and we're back at Hat Studio. You can tell because the robot is holding the hat. And I got my old friend. Are we old? Have we known each other long enough?
We are.
Old friends? We're old. And we're friends.
And we're friends.
So
That's
Tony
right.
Manzur, who has been on other podcasts with me, but not this one.
Yes.
So, and this is your
What an
first
honor.
time to the hat. Oh, would you like a hat?
Yes, of course.
He gets to have a hat.
Oh, I love it. Look at
You
this.
don't have to wear it right now, but
Thank you
but,
so much.
You can wear it right
The
now.
Hat Studio.
The hat studio.
Wow, I love it.
So,
Thank you.
Hat Studio, home of the new BrainPub Network, which I've already told you about. We're launching this new podcast network. The idea of BrainPub is we want to have we want to get out of the echo chamber, and we want to be able to have different shows on the network where people come together and we can just talk about things we don't necessarily always agree,
Yeah.
but we still have a drink. By the way, salud.
Hey, yes.
Have a drink. Got
Cheers.
your
Salud.
Do okay on the Cuba
Love
Libre.
it.
The Cuba
Love
Libre.
it.
Yeah,
Great.
so-
No,
and,
really, you did.
we've had cocktails on a podcast before
Yes.
on
For,
OGG and Unscripted.
It was
We did the Hawaiian theme, right?
Mahi.
And it was mahi mahi is a fish.
No, not mahi mahi.
It was
Mai Tai.
Mai Tai. Mai Tai. We had Mai Tai.
I just ate fish today. So.
Yeah. And yeah. So, anyways, but today we're drinking rum. I got a rum old fashioned. You got a Cuba Libre.
You made me a really good Cuba Libre.
Okay.
It's really good.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. I have some talents. Anyway, what were we talking about? Oh, yeah. So BrainPub Network, we want to be able to come together, talk about stuff. Maybe we don't always agree. I think you and I agree on a lot of things.
Totally gonna agree.
But not always. And but the idea is that we can have a drink and we can still be friends afterwards. So
Absolutely.
This particular show, Saving the Dream. So you were one of the first people that when I said, okay, I'm doing this new show called Saving the Dream. It's kind of about life in America, the American dream. Like you got it. Like I didn't really have to explain it to you. Not that everybody else is stupid, but usually you have to say. So the concept is we want to talk about da 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 da. But like you kind of zeroed in on it right away. So I'm thinking you got a lot of good things to say.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
I love the concept.
Yeah. So but first, about you. You're not from here, obviously. Either that
Not from here.
Either that or you're doing a fake accent.
I'm just doing a fake. No, that's right. Not from here. I was born in Mexico City.
Yeah.
And I came here. So I've been in the U.S. on 2 different occasions. So I've had 2 tours. The first one was in high school.
Yeah.
I did junior and senior years of high school in the U.S. in San Antonio. And then I came back for...
So, did you have family here or something? Like,
No,
did your parents just randomly kick you out and send you to San Antonio?
They kicked me. So my parents, like almost every parent in the 90s in Mexico, they wanted the kids to learn English, right? So there was a high school in
I'm not
San
sure if San
Antonio.
Antonio is the best place to learn English.
Yeah, right. That's what I thought first. But then the other thing is that some parents also want to keep their kids as close as possible to home. So Texas, California made perfect sense. But yeah, at the time this high school still had a dormitory. So there was a good, I would say about 20% of the students were boarders.
Yeah.
And most of my classmates were actually ranch kids that came from ranches in rural Texas.
Right.
So
Where they didn't have a school close by, right?
they didn't have a school close by, so the parents would drop them off.
Is this the
on
1890s
Sunday.
when you went to high school?
This
sounds like it's a very long time ago.
Very long
There was
time
no
ago.
school. We had to take the wagon into town
They would arrive with the large pickup truck and those large ranch families, and they would drop off the kids on Sunday after school, after church in the afternoon, right?
Yeah.
And then they would pick them back up on Friday after school, right?
Okay.
So during the week, I used to, spend time with all of these kids, and sometimes I would go to the ranch on the weekend because we became good friends. So we would ride horses and and shoot guns and do just the regular activities that teenage kids in Texas do.
Ride horses and shoot guns. Wow, that's it. You were still in high school, so you didn't drink beer, obviously.
Oh, we drank a lot of beer, and actually, so I always looked a little older.
Yeah, you
So
still do. By the way,
I was the one
Yeah.
that purchased the beer.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
You
So
were
I was that kid, right?
You're not.
Yeah, I have some
I don't
good stories.
see. I don't pick. You're such a mild mannered, like good, like you don't seem like a troublemaker.
No, I wasn't a troll. I just thought, what's beer?
Yeah.
In Mexico City, my friends over there at 16 and 17, they were all already drinking hard liquor, right?
Sure,
So
yeah.
I thought, how bad can, a couple of Bud Lights or Miller
Yeah.
Lights can, that's almost water.
I mean, back in the Old West, they didn't even consider beer to be booze.
That's right.
Beer
That's
was
right.
just, if you were, if you were, I learned this in a John Wayne movie, by the way, the one with Dean Martin, where Dean Martin is the drunk. Which one is that? It's either El Dorado or Rio Bravo.
I think it's El Dorado.
I think it's El Dorado, right? Dean Martin is the drunk, and
Yeah.
they're trying to get him.
Yeah.
They're trying to dry him out, right? And so they won't give him any whiskey, but beer is fine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's not.
That wasn't even considered.
That wasn't really
an
contributing
adult
to it.
beverage back in the day.
So,
Of course.
So all right, well, we're way off track. There's really not a track. So that was your first tour.
That was the first tour, and then I went back to Mexico. I studied college in Mexico and worked for a few years, and then
Did you learn English while you were in the U.S. in high school?
in high school, yes,
Yeah.
because actually there were several Hispanic students, but let's say the language was definitely English.
Yeah.
And then at the dorm, all of these ranch kids, they spoke English.
Sure.
Right? So most of them were white ranch kids. Right?
Yeah.
These were not the kids from, let's say,
Like the Valley.
not necessarily from from Rio Grande Valley. Although some were, but they were just
Yeah.
white background, right?
Right.
So they spoke English.
Yeah.
And
Were they
that's
nice
how-
to you?
They were super nice,
Yeah.
nice. I only have good memories.
Oh yeah.
And they would I would spend so many weekends with them, just and I learned a lot about Texas. So ever since I've really liked Texas and Texan culture.
yeah.
So when it was time to go to business school, I applied to Rice University, thinking, maybe I can go back to
To Houston.
to Texas. And I was in the oil business in Mexico. I worked for Pemex, so I thought, let's go to Houston and just remain in oil and gas.
Yeah, that's a fine choice, I think. But of course, we have our common oil and gas background.
have a common
so we're champions for that particular industry. Which, by the way, on the subject of the American dream, the oil and gas industry has done a lot of good for a lot of people.
Certainly.
So, all right, so you came back here, and you've been in Houston ever since then, right? So,
Yes.
that was
Since
43 years ago. Yeah.
2009.
In 2000.
My brother actually worked in a pipeline company called El Paso. Today's Kinder Morgan. So we were roommates.
Oh yeah.
So I re-encountered my brother, my younger brother. He's younger by 1 year. So we were roommates while I was in business school, and he would
Oh, cool.
go to downtown Houston and worked in El Paso.
Yeah.
As an engineer.
So you got married here.
So yes, after business school, I married my wife, who I met in business school. She was my classmate.
And she's a Cajun, right? From Louisiana?
She's
Yeah.
a full
Yeah.
Cajun. Her name is Liel LeBlanc
Oh, yeah.
from Lafayette, Louisiana, and we have a little
How's her
Cajun,
gumbo?
Mexican, Texan family.
So, what's funny is you can, so living my adult life here in Houston, you learn to cook different ways, right? So cooking Mexican style, and I'm talking about Mexican, not not Tex-Mex, right? But cooking like traditional Mexican style and cooking Cajun style is not that much different.
No.
The seasonings are different, and some of the techniques, like you don't make a roux in Mexico, really, right? Like you do, but
No, that's very Cajun. The roux.
but that's right. The roux is very Cajun. You don't do that. But there's a lot of
It's very similar.
There's a lot of
In fact,
beans and a lot of rice.
Think of Tabasco sauce, right?
Right,
So
yeah.
so it's called Tabasco because the peppers come from the state of Tabasco in Mexico.
Yes.
So they go across the Gulf of Mexico, and they created this sauce that if you go to Mexico today, people in Mexico would tell you Tabasco sauce is a Mexican product
Yeah.
because it's beloved in Mexico. I don't think a Mexican would ever dare to eat any seafood without using Tabasco sauce.
Yeah.
And what's incredible is that, it was Tabasco peppers imported into Louisiana, and then the McElhenney family
Took it, right.
turned it in
Right.
to the sauce in Avery Island. And
It has a particular flavor that's not the same as any others.
it's very unique. I love it.
It's
I
very
go
good.
through, a lot of Tabasco bottles.
So, but there's also a sauce in Costa Rica that they call Tabasco, which
Oh, really?
but it's a different brand and it's a different flavor altogether. It's very thick. Comes in little bottles, very thick. The brand is Linz something, Linz something. I can't remember, but it's very good. It's hotter than
Tabasco.
but the label says Tabasco. Anyway, just beside the point.
Maybe it's the same pepper, Tabasco pepper.
Maybe so. I don't know. I'm gonna have to look into that. All right. You and I, I guess it was a week or two ago, you sent me a text and you said, "Hey, I just found this," because you knew that you were going to be on the show. And you said, "I found this article in the Wall Street Journal. It's very interesting." And I said, "I just read the same article, right? Because we both have the subscription." And I have that article right here. I want to talk about it briefly, since we both found it interesting. And so the article is. So for those of you following along at home, if you want to look this up, the Wall Street Journal, the headline for the article is kind of long. It says, "Republicans and Democrats differ on rewards of work. They differ on rewards of work and American greatness." In this poll that was conducted by the Wall Street Journal, and this article came out on September 22nd. And so the interesting thing, so they asked, and like we do with everything nowadays, we map everything to what Republicans think and what do Democrats think, right? It doesn't matter what it is. If we wanted to take a poll on whether this robot should stay orange or be painted blue,
You would split the.
we would ask the Republicans and we would ask the Democrats, what do you think?
It's so silly.
And then we would draw conclusions from their answers, right?
That's right. Yeah, so silly.
So, but in this case, the questions, so there was a number of questions. We're not going to go through the whole thing, but the questions were, they're asking, do you believe that in this country, anyone who works hard can get ahead? And do you think that this generation will do better than the one that came before? Because although those are basic, they're not metrics, but they're indicators of, kind of how good are things here, right?
That's right.
Like, if you work hard, can you get ahead? Because that's sort of always been, the underlying, by the way, this is the book, The Epic of America. James Truslow Adams, who was a historian, and we talked about this book. This is the 1932 printing. He wrote it in 31, and it's a history book that concludes in the 1930s saying we've got this place that affords this thing called the American dream, and it's one of those things that nowadays we always say, well, it means different things to different people, but really it means the same thing to everybody,
Yes.
which is can you have his words were a better, richer, happier life is that opportunity afforded? So that's the idea, and so that's kind of what they're asking here. And so 85% of Republicans, so a very large majority, believe that if you work hard in America, you can get ahead. Whatever get ahead means, right? You can do better. And only half of Democrats think that's true. So virtually all the Republicans, 85%, In my world, that's virtually all.
Yeah.
And half, but only half of Democrats. And then another question was, is America the greatest country in the world? And over 90% of Republicans said yes, and only about 60% of Democrats said yes. So there's I mean, as silly as it sounds, but there's definitely a correlation between this group of people who associate with this political party or are conservative minded, right? Say, if you work hard here, you can get ahead, and this is the greatest country in the world, far and away. People of another political persuasion say that they're not completely the opposite, but they're like not so sure.
More skeptical.
Not necessarily, right?
Yeah.
So as somebody, and I forgot to mention that you also have a marketing background, so
Yes.
so you know something about kind of how people think in psychology and how things get represented, but and as somebody coming from somewhere else, from another country, how do you interpret that, and or how does it compare to what you see in real life?
Well, it would have been interesting, instead of splitting the sample between Democrats and Republicans, to perhaps do some other breakdown of the sample. For example,
What else is there? I thought that was the only thing there is. what do you mean?
I wonder
Do Catholics and Protestants.
but for example, immigrants versus natives.
Okay.
That would be very interesting, because I am an immigrant. I am a U.S. citizen, but I am an immigrant, and I am also the product of immigration into Mexico. So my grandparents were born in Lebanon, and they came to Mexico as...
I always thought you looked... I always was trying to figure out how you're from Mexico, but you don't look...
Yes. So I'm the product of... So my grandparents came into Mexico from Lebanon. That's from my dad's side. From my mom's side, we're from Mexico. But, I grew up with, grandparents who spoke Arabic, and they were definitely not, locals, right? They adapted well because they were Catholic Maronites, and, that made a good click with Mexico.
Right.
But now I am an immigrant myself, and I think, we're a little more optimistic about things. So in my case, I do believe that there is an American dream, and that it is easier now more than at any other point in time. I mean, that book was written in 1931 and published in 32, you said?
Yeah.
So,
Published in 31, yeah.
The country was in a deep recession at the time.
Yeah, sure.
It was, I mean, the recession was still ongoing.
Yeah.
We had a president who was trying to pull the country back into let's say economic growth, but he was very austere, right? That was Herbert Hoover.
Yeah, sure.
So very difficult.
So then they brought the
times.
other guy in, but that's another story.
Yeah, exactly. So imagine if someone wrote a book in 1931, 1932, when there was still, a lot of racial issues in the country, right?
Right,
People
sure.
who couldn't really do much depending on what was the pigmentation of their skin.
Right.
Right. Imagine in 2022, right? That American dream is even easier to accomplish. I think it's more
that's
real
interesting, because
than it's ever been.
So, and that's, and a lot of, so I think that there's people that feel, I mean, I know there's a lot of people who feel the opposite, who they actually feel like, well, there's a lot of people who don't think we ever had it right? Like we were bad from the beginning.
That's right.
There's people who think that. Most of them haven't actually read any history books. They've only listened to what other people say.
That's true.
But it doesn't matter, because you can't read the history books, because they were written by the same crooks that created the bad system. But then there's a lot of people who say, well, we're not doing enough to help people, like we being the government or whoever, somebody. Most of the time nowadays it's the government. Everybody thinks the government should be doing more than it's doing, except for those of us who think it ought to be doing less than it's doing. But Why do you think it's easier now?
Well, because without any doubt, there's less biases depending on the pigmentation of your skin.
Is there?
There can be
I mean, I think there is, but there are some people who say it hasn't improved.
I think there are idiots who will remain with those biases. But you now have a very active private and public sector advocating for equal rights for in terms of gender and sexual orientation and race. And I do not believe that, I think you would be foolish to believe that a person of color or perhaps a homosexual or someone with a different or a non-traditional gender orientation faces more roadblocks today than in the 1930s.
It's got to be better now.
That's just
right?
something
Yeah.
that I will not accept.
Yeah.
I mean, regardless of what the audience is or how they feel about it or what personal experiences they've had, it's unacceptable to believe that. Today, people who are not white or straight or Christian enjoy certain rights and certain privileges.
You can do a lot more.
They would definitely not have faced in the 60s or in the 30s.
Yeah.
Or in the 19th century, right?
Right.
So, yes, the American dream for everyone, for immigrants and for natives is more achievable today than it's ever been.
Yeah.
Who would have imagined that, a white Cajun rural girl was going to get married to a half Mexican, half Arab, Spanish speak. I've been visiting her family for
They still
years.
talk. They still talk to you, right?
Years now, and not even Well, from the beginning, actually, one thing that helped is that I was able to speak to the grandmothers in French. And believe it or not, most Cajun people today don't speak French, but I do. So the grandmothers appreciated that a lot. But regardless,
time out. How did you end up learning to speak French?
Well, I studied in high school, and then when I was in college, my university in Mexico required, in order to graduate, to speak two additional. So we had to have an English certification.
Yeah.
And we had to have the equivalent of the English certificate for any other language.
Any other language, yeah.
And I picked French.
That was a good move. Yeah. You couldn't have known at the time how important that was going to be.
That's right.
Yeah. So you talked to the grandmothers in French, and they thought you were okay.
Yeah, but I mean,
this half Mexican, half Lebanese guy.
This guy's going to be okay.
He's going to be all right. Yeah.
But and look, I'm not. I mean, I'm brown. I mean, and I've never really faced any, the ranch kids and my high school, and I could not ever tell you that in the many years that I've lived in America, I've ever faced any kind of discrimination, not at work, not at school, not with women in on dates. Yeah. Never friendship, never of any kind. So that doesn't mean that others perhaps haven't face that discrimination, but I don't think it's something that will impact in any way the final outcome of your life.
Yeah, I think there are always exceptions because of particular circumstances, and a lot of times when people try to make generalizations that don't really fit the norm, but they want to make that generalization because it supports an agenda or narrative. What they do is they tie it to that less than 1% or that 1% or that small percentage of course. Or the exception, whatever the thing is. We see that, all the time. Like we should allow something to happen because of the 1% of the time when there's some extreme badness that comes from it, and therefore we should. So, but what it means though is, so like you said, it doesn't, just because you had a nice time of it, it doesn't mean that other people didn't have a nice time, or that other people didn't have a bad time. But it does mean that it's not pervasive. So sometimes when we listen to what people say, the loud people, right, or the people in the media, they kind of make it seem like there's this constant oppression and discrimination, or whatever you want to call it, that's just constantly present toward everybody who is not from here, or right. And the only way it ever stops is when somebody gets involved, government or somebody steps in and forces people to stop acting that way, or forces or regulates or makes some kind of a rule. Because without that intervention, it's always there all the time for everybody, right? That's like the impression that you get.
Yes, that's right. I think the people who have this opinion, I think they need to travel more. I come from a third world country. I've seen real poverty. I've traveled to many places in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, where there's real poverty, where there's real discrimination against a group of people. I think we often think of America as the world, and the reality is that Americans don't know what real poverty is. Americans don't know what real at least Americans today don't know what a real discrimination is, or unsafe cities. So I hear a lot about cities are getting so dangerous, and yes, some cities, as they grow, they go through crime waves, but coming from Mexico City, or people who come from San Salvador or Tegucigalpa, they will have a very extremely different opinion, right? Backed up by numbers, not just by qualitative judges, right? So I think a lot of it comes out of ignorance. People who maybe you and I, Michael, maybe have the benefit that we met World War II veterans. We met Holocaust survivors.
Yeah.
We met people who really suffered in their lifetimes. And since the world has enjoyed peace dividend for so long, I think a lot of young people in universities today, they never met, maybe a war veteran. Maybe they never met a Holocaust survivor, which for you and I, they would come to school and they would share their stories, even in Mexico, right? Yeah. We had a large population.
Because it turns out it really happens.
It actually,
it really happened. It was real. It was real.
So I wonder, what would a Holocaust survivor think of today's America? Is it really as bad as 1930s Germany?
Sure.
So I think,
or somebody that has been in some other part of the world, in Asia or Africa, that's been the victim of ethnic cleansing.
Yes.
Right?
Imagine how horrendous. Talk to people from the Balkans today. What do they have to say about racial relationships in America compared to the horrendous tragedies that they went through in the 80s and the 90s, right? So I think a lot of it has to do with social media is dominated by a group of young people who have no perspective, no education, no real outside. Maybe they went with their church 1 week to Guatemala to paint a school, but that's it. They haven't really experienced what it's really like to be an inhabitant of the third world and really live with those problems. Living in a country like Colombia or Mexico or Venezuela, countries that are overtaken by drug dealers, right? Where it's dangerous to drive from one city to the other and really get to see, it's not, some people, I was reading the other day that, there were some young people who didn't want to drive from, I think, Mississippi to New Orleans because they were of color. And look, I've driven the roads of Louisiana and Mississippi and Tennessee many, many times with my family, and I am of color, and I am perfectly okay driving and stopping
You're
in
fine.
a gas station and, getting something to eat. And the people actually happen to be very kind and very nice. I would dare them to, drive from Culiacan to Durango in Mexico and see what,
see what happens.
What
They might not come back. All right, so I'm gonna play the other side of this for a second. So even though I agree with you completely, but the other side would say, okay, fine. Look, you can always find something, someplace, some situation that's worse, that's uglier, that's nastier. That doesn't make that what we have now good. Right. Just because you're telling me these extreme stories that happen, it doesn't mean that our system here isn't broken and shouldn't be fixed, like aggressively fixed, because it's not working. And so let's kind of shift to you came here, grew up, went to school. You've been reasonably successful. You got on a nice Hawaiian shirt. You got the
Exactly. This
you
is
got
the meaning of
you got the memo. This is it. I mean, it's a Monday afternoon and we're both wearing tropical attire. Like,
Exactly.
we haven't done too bad.
Hey, absolutely.
But I know something about you, and so how were you? Were you just lucky? Like, how did you go from so leaving out the part about like you're in a place where you don't have to fear for your life? How did you get from being, an immigrant student to where you are now?
Well, first is I was mostly educated in Mexico, except for 2 years, my last 2 years of high school. My education took place in Mexico. And to this day, I still laugh about, how worried American parents are about, whether there is a school that has an extra star on the... that is laughable because, I mean, there's a lot of people here in this country from many countries that, we just were educated there, and we did just fine in life because we worked hard, right?
Yeah, okay.
We, now I see all of these Kumon centers everywhere in the city, right?
Yeah. I'm not really sure what those are.
you think-
exactly?
I think they teach them math, right?
like you
But
send your
do you
kids there
really-
for extra teaching,
to learn math and to get good grades on the SAT. But do you really think that every single Indian who lives here and is an engineer had the opportunity of going to a Kumon center in India?
Probably not.
No, they just went to their local school
Yeah.
and they worked really hard.
Yeah.
Right? Math is math is math.
This working hard thing you keep mentioning, that seems to be an important component of...
Yes, just if you're at an age where you're supposed to study hard and try to learn something, and study for the long term, not for the short term, I guess.
Yeah.
So first you need to be a good student, and then there are companies that visit every university in this country.
Yeah.
Even if you're in a community college, there will be local companies that will visit, and they will post jobs.
Yeah.
Well, apply for those jobs, and
Yeah.
really do things that will.
You make it sound so easy. You could just get a job.
It is difficult. It is difficult. You have to work hard. You have to show that you really want that job. Right?
Yeah.
There is a component of the American dream that is very Darwinian. So I think people who are very competitive in nature will do very well in America.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
I have family and friends who have come here and they've gotten a degree, a master's degree or whatever, and they ended up going back to Mexico because they did not have that component of competitiveness that is required. Everything is highly competitive in this country. There are other countries where it is not. For example, in the United Kingdom, they still have that, royal tradition. And if you look at the prime ministers of the last 2 centuries, 90% of them or more were Oxford graduates. There are certain institutions in the United Kingdom and certain traditions that will get you places. Not in America. In America, we compete for everything.
Yeah.
Right? So you must be someone who enjoys competition. And the system is Darwinian. You will
meaning
be destroyed.
Survival of the fittest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and
So is that fair?
I don't know if it's fair, but it is.
It's how it is.
Yes, right. That's
Yeah.
what it's how we.
Well, I guess
exist.
maybe let me ask this way: does that so in terms of making the American dream a reality, or at least a potential? Well, this is another philosophical debate, right? Which is should it be a possible reality for everyone, or should we actively do things to make it a reality for everyone? So because if it's the second one, which I think, the original idea was everybody, and in his book he doesn't say where everybody gets the same, where everybody's rewarded with the same level of success. But he says everybody has the opportunity through hard work and these kinds of good character traits and things. But if we say, well, so if we say we want to tweak the system to make sure that everybody gets the same outcome instead of the same possibility, then we have to go in and we have to fix that problem where it only works for people who are competitive. Because what about the people who aren't competitive by nature? They need to have the same, they shouldn't be discriminated against.
Yes, of course. And I think it's very important as a society that some people who were truly born with a handicap, right? People with, for example, my son has autism, so he gets certain facilitation at school, right?
Sure.
For, when he's answering a test, we no longer do what we did when I was a kid, probably nothing, right? I mean, just look, either you can respond to the quiz or the test here with everybody else with all of the stimulation around you, or you probably fail, right? Well, now we have that accommodation for kids with ADHD, with autism. We have accommodations for people who were born with some form of disability. I think as a society we need to take better care, for example, of people who have mental illness and are in the streets. It is, I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but I mean, in this country we have a very serious people with a very serious problem with the amount of people who are in the streets in a state of hallucination, saying nonsense and acting erratically. We need all of these people to receive the help that they need, because they don't. If we don't help them, they are completely helpless, right? And I'm not talking about the hippies who decide to get pot money in the streets, right? All of them can go straight to hell. But the people who truly need help, we as a society, I think, need to help them out.
That's a complex problem. We don't have enough time today to discuss how do you go about doing that. But in principle, that seems like the right thing.
Some people need some help, and that's okay. I'm okay with, people, getting some help, but making or trying to ensure that everybody has the same outcome is. That's just not what America is about. That there are other countries that try to do that, right? And
how does it work? Does it work?
Well, usually, people tend to use the Scandinavian countries as an example. Right. But these countries, their entire population is, for example, the population of any of them independently is less than the city of Houston.
Yeah, Norway is 5 million.
Yes.
So
very homogeneous.
Yep.
they do not have the heterogeneity we have here.
There's almost no half Mexican, half Lebanese people there.
Except for maybe 20 years ago when they started welcoming more immigrants.
Yeah.
But they had already set up their social welfare networks. They already have everything set in place. This country is a mix of all sorts of people, people who came here as slaves from Africa, people who came from various countries in Europe, people who were here and then they suddenly had to adapt to a different national reality, like people in Texas, in California, and Arizona.
Yeah.
So it's a melting pot.
Well, and then you had everybody who came through Ellis Islands, right, in the early 1900s. You still have in the Northeast. You still have this is the Italian neighborhood, right, and this is the Polish neighborhood, and this is the.
So the comparison to Denmark and to Sweden.
But why does that?
Lived in Scandinavia, and I do not like those comparisons.
Yeah, well,
They're
I think
different.
the point is, sure they're different. So somebody might say, well, okay, fine. So they're different. Why does that matter? Well, because what you can do. Let's just say for the government programs, for example, what you can do in the way of government programs for a group of 5 million people, that's the entire country, and they all come from very similar backgrounds and things like this. It doesn't scale to a country of 400 million people with people from all different cultures and all different, right? That's where it kind of starts to break down. But the question is more like, should we, if we could do that, if we could engineer the outcomes for everybody, is that better than kind of letting everybody stand on their own 2 feet or however many feet they have? No discrimination against people with 1 foot or 3 feet. Let them.
It is not.
It's not. Yeah. So why is it not better?
It is.
Why is it better to do it this way? And speaking as somebody who's had to do it, right? So why?
So it is better because it ensures that everybody is working hard. Okay.
Yeah.
So listen, you've worked with a lot of people from Europe and from Scandinavia in particular. And have you ever tried to work with them during summer?
During summer? Yeah, no, they're not present during summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's because a lot of their existence is secured by a social welfare bed that they can fall on.
Yes.
Right? And, that creates a problem of not everybody necessarily working hard.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this isn't what we're comparing are the systems, right? So it's not, so people are people, right? Nothing against people. But it was explained to me one time by a guy that I worked with who was from Denmark. And he said, and we were hiring him to do some contract, business development work on contract, right? And so I was negotiating the contract with him, and I wanted there to be a lot of things in the contract to kind of, it's like, well, if you're going to do this work for us, and we're going to pay you a certain amount, and you have to deliver certain things, and I wanted that to be very clearly defined, what we're going to get in exchange for what you're going to do. And his version of the contract was like very sort of like, the commitment wasn't clearly, and he laughed. And so when I was asking about it, the way he explained it to me is exactly what you just said. He said, look, over here, he said, the 3 things that Americans worry about in terms of you going to work, like I need to make money so that in the long term, so
health, retirement, and education.
And health, exactly. That was exactly what he said.
They don't pay for any of that.
And you're right. He said, so those are like the driving forces that keep you, besides putting food on the table every day, the thing that makes you work for the future is if I get sick, I gotta be able to pay the hospital. I need health insurance, right? If my kids need education and I need retirement. And he said, and he goes, and we don't worry about any of that. So we're just not as highly
I know that they don't worry about that. That's exactly right, and that's the reason why perhaps. But let me give you an example. I take my family to Mexico for to vacation regularly. We go to
Not Durango.
Not Durango. We go to Cancun or we go to Cabo, right? And we stay in resorts where there's a lot of foreigners with their families,
Sure.
and when it's time for drinks, right? You see two types of foreigners. There's one with sunglasses, right? That perhaps is a little overweight. He approaches the bar and he throws a credit card, and he basically tells the bartender, just get drinks for everybody, man. We'll settle it after.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just, bill it to the room. I don't even want to see the check, and, I'm going to give you a big tip.
Yeah.
Right? And everybody's happy, and everybody's a little loud.
Yeah.
And maybe has a little too much meat in their body, okay? Then there's the other foreigner,
Yeah.
who is definitely very slim, very,
Yes.
very, very slim. And they approach the bartender, and they literally review the check to the cent,
Yeah.
right? That's the difference between America and Europe,
Yeah.
okay? Do you want to retire
We're the first one, right?
with the, yes.
Yeah, the Americans. We're the good guys that buy drinks for the house. And
Yes,
we don't
frankly, there's a little more money in the bank account. There's it's a little more risky to retire, but you will retire, and if you save and if you work hard, you will be the person treating everybody at the bar. People from Europe they're very careful with money. They have very little of it. They review the check.
So why? They have little of it because they give most of it to the government,
also,
right?
the same Americans that I see in Cancun and
Yeah.
etc. Every day, the 7 days, they have a different swimming suit. They have a different T-shirt. When I see them at night, they're wearing different Hawaiian tropical shirts.
Yes.
Okay, the Europeans, they wear 2 or 3 outfits the whole vacation.
Yeah.
Okay?
This is so.
All right, these are differences, and
If I ever go on vacation with you, I'm going to be so self-conscious because you're going to be watching me the whole time to.
It's like you always have to okay, the waiter is not coming with the drinks because the Europeans are checking the check, and they got charged 13 extra cents here, and they want a refund, and that's how they are. So it's a very different level of prosperity.
Yeah.
To be honest, sometimes they live in cities, they don't drive a car. Here we like driving cars.
Yeah, we do.
When we go on vacation, we like going big and spending a lot of money and staying in the good hotels and go shopping before the trip. So it's a very different type of prosperity.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, they have their education is guaranteed, their health is guaranteed, their retirement is guaranteed. But in Europe, they don't have the prosperity that we enjoy in the United States, and it comes with a big cost. It is very Darwinian. You can get burnt on the way to the American dream. Yes.
Yeah.
You have to be able to compete very hard.
Yeah.
Here we compete for absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Right? So unless you have that in your system, it will be very difficult.
Yeah, yeah. But here's the thing: is almost anybody. So being competitive. So some people are competitive by nature, and some people are not competitive by
Yes.
nature. Maybe, or is it really by nature, or are you competitive because of something in your environment that made you competitive? So what I'm getting at is couldn't anybody, even somebody who's meek and mild and whatever else, couldn't anybody raise themselves to the level of become competitive if they wanted to in order to win, right?
I think
Mostly leaving out the exceptions, right? Leaving out the people with autism and leaving out, or whatever.
I think yes, because even it's not like they're gonna have even people with autism and ADHD and with disabilities are gonna have to compete for the limited
Something,
roles
right, yeah.
that they. So, but I think
Because it's how the human race has survived and progressed and evolved, right? Is by it's kind of, I guess what I'm getting at is, and this, I don't know, this is probably very controversial, and neither one of us is a sociologist or an anthropologist, that I know of. Are you?
No.
I'm not. So, but like, is it an excuse to say, well, that I'm just not like that, or well, I tried a lot of times and it didn't work out. I mean, you did say when we were talking earlier, you said that you've been. What did you say? I've been disappointed by so many things in life that now you just order your steaks well done. Because you don't want to take the risk that somebody's going to screw it up, right?
Yeah.
So let you
On many things, I go for the safe option.
Yeah.
Because I guess maybe it's because I'm getting older, and I just don't want to be disappointed. So I visit less restaurants. I only go to the ones where I know they're gonna do a good job.
You're becoming the grumpy old guy.
I try to avoid the ones where the waiter waits for you to type on the tip.
Yes.
I think that is so anti everything I believe in.
Wait.
So they approach you, so they wait for you, and they show you the terminal. And the options now are 20%, 22%, and 25%.
Yeah.
After tax, by the way.
Right. Yeah, after tax.
Nobody became millionaire.
Yeah.
Nobody became wealthy by tipping 25% after tax. Okay, that's all I'm saying.
If somebody really, all right, so I'm the type that if somebody really kicks ass and they're doing a great job and they go out of their way to make the experience for me better, even if they don't do everything perfectly, like even if they screw up a couple things, then I'm happy to give 25 or even 30%, or and especially if it's a place where I go frequently and I know them, like I'm helping them out, like because you kind of get to know people and
of course,
like this one's trying to get through college, so I'm going to put some extra.
The check is $40-$60.
Yeah,
but sometimes the check is already $200 or $300. And most of it was alcohol.
Yes,
and they expect 25% after tax.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Back when so when I was a kid, and my dad taught us how to go to restaurants, and he was in sales, so he went to a lot of restaurants, did a lot of traveling and things like this. Now this is back in olden times, right? But this is back when the regular tipping amount was 15%.
Yeah,
that was 15. But what he taught me, and again, this is probably late 70s, early 80s. And what he said was, but the rule at that time was, but you only tip 10% on the alcohol, on the bar part of the thing. Because the booze costs a lot more, but doesn't necessarily create so much more work to do, right? So back then the rule was 15% on the food and 10% on the liquor.
So imagine, so you've worked in various corporations. Imagine there was a performance appraisal where your manager, at the time of evaluating your performance for the year, he had 3 options: very good, outstanding, or exceptional. That's honestly, when I see 18, 22, and 25%, I see where is the option that I have as a consumer of you didn't do a good job.
Yeah.
Or you did an okay job.
Tony, I think you're a little behind the times. Everybody gets a trophy.
But you want to know something? That's part of what is wrong, I think, with culture today.
Yeah.
That yes, actually, sometimes in life, you're gonna fail.
Right.
And sometimes people are gonna tell you terrible things.
It might have even happened to me.
And you're gonna be laid off. And you're gonna get, punished.
Right.
So why do we set up these terminals for, all of these ramen places in the Heights with 1822? We're just generating a bunch of mediocre people. I mean, look, what about as an owner? Hey, man, you want to know something? I'm going to have 0. I'm going to have 10, 15, 20, and 25.
Yeah. Okay.
I would like to see, and by the way, don't wait for them. Place the terminal on the table and walk a couple of steps so that they can, in private, in secret, evaluate you.
It's true, but
What is this?
It's yeah. I still prefer the old, like, you just write it on the paper thing.
Oh, of course.
Because then you can also write little notes, right?
Yes.
But you make a point, which is, I mean, it's just another way in which, if we just make it easy for everybody, then you're not, getting back to this. If we're going to realize the American dream in society, for most people, it's never going to be for everybody, right? But then you have to, you got to earn it,
You gotta earn it.
right? You got to earn
It
it.
has to be difficult.
Yeah.
And for some of us, and I include myself because, when I was looking for a job after business school, it's not like I have, an American dad calling his buddies. At the time, my dad, he was a working man in Mexico and he had a network there. But he doesn't even speak English.
Yeah.
So I just had to go and get a job in Houston, Texas.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, so where was the first job?
it was at FMC Technologies.
Wait. So and you recently left there.
Yes.
But so you were with them your whole career.
My entire career. And I mean, there was
40 or
no-
50 years.
Yeah, it was just
No.
I'm applying and I call people and I email people and I network and I share with them why I'm a candidate and just did it that way. I didn't have any anyone to, let's say, any close family or friends who could, like, okay, let's get this, he's one of us, or let's bring him over. No. And I think it's very similar to a lot of people who are not wealthy in this country and are in college or in high school.
Right.
Yes, there is always going to be a small minority of people that already are born with certain connections. Hey,
That's great.
that's life.
Yeah,
Good
yeah.
for them. But that doesn't mean that you cannot build yourself,
Right.
right? Or,
Yeah, this is the theme that, this comes up. This is the fifth episode that I've recorded. We're gonna drop the first 5 all at once to kind of get the show going. So congratulations, you're in the first 5. I don't know if anybody's gonna listen yet because we don't have an audience, but we're gonna give it our best shot,
Of course,
to draw some attention to it. And but so far in the first 5 episodes, which have been with very different people. Let's see. Two of you are immigrants. One, you, and then I think you've met Ration Tulsi. He's from South Africa originally. 2 people are Americans. Anyway, the point is, like, I can see where this is going to be a challenge to to maintain the variety in the conversation, because all of you keep coming back to this one thing, which is you actually have to work hard. Like,
yes,
you're gonna have to work hard. You're gonna have to work hard. Like, that's
it.
Everybody's it keeps coming back to that.
That's the one thing. you have to do.
So I'm gonna
work hard.
have to. we're gonna have to work hard on keeping the conversation.
I mean, there are other things, like, for example, try to embrace some of the some of the things that your community likes, I think.
Oh yeah, okay.
Right? Especially as an immigrant, right?
Yeah.
So, one of them is sports. So American sports are very unique to America. American football, for example, is not played anywhere in the world, right?
Except Canada.
Except Canada. And baseball, same thing. Only a couple of other countries, Japan, the Caribbean islands, Mexico, Venezuela, but it's a very minor sport.
Right.
Very minor. Right. And the same with basketball, right?
It's very American.
A couple of countries in Europe, and they play it. It's not big like soccer is everywhere else.
Right.
So I think some of the things that you can do is, and this is the immigrant perspective, is try to embrace America and its culture. America couldn't have been built only with hard power. It was built with a very nice element of soft power, right?
Soft power.
Yes, which is the American influence in sports, in culture, in art, in literature, and there's really an American way of doing things. Even food, right? I mean, America, has certain, even a culinary tradition. So I think one of the things that you can do from an immigrant standpoint is to embrace America, and really try to adapt and never necessarily give away the your culture and what you bring with you, right? But embrace America, because it's a fun country. With remarkable traditions. Halloween, Thanksgiving, these things that sometimes immigrants don't understand very well. Just buy a costume at your local Walmart and go trick-or-treating.
It's true.
Thanksgiving, it's one of those that is very difficult. It's very American. Well, just cook a turkey.
Just go.
Country music. Buy a couple of songs from Garth Brooks and just enjoy it. It's beautiful.
So a really interesting point. We should probably we'll wrap up on this, because otherwise we'll keep going. But it makes me think. So I've never really heard somebody say it quite like that, because usually we're always taught as Americans who are from here, we're, especially in the last few decades, we're always taught that we're supposed to try to be sensitive to everybody else's culture, right?
More?
Yeah. Well, like whenever we travel. So once I got old enough to, let's say, travel for business, and I'm going to other countries, there's all this advice you get about how to make sure that you do things in a way that doesn't offend the people in the other country, because you're an American and by nature you're offensive. And so I thought about this at the time. It's like, okay, so I'm learning about how to, when I go to these other places, but when you come here, we just kind of let you do. You can. In fact, we're told that we're supposed to be extra sensitive to your culture. So, but if I take what you just said, so what you're saying is, to the people who are coming to this country, you're saying, like, embrace it, enjoy it. There's traditions. There's what we should do. The ones who are originally from here, is we should actually help people to enjoy the culture, right? Like, we should instead of trying to constantly be sensitive to everybody else's culture, we should introduce them to, bring them into the party, I guess is what I'm saying, and say, this is how we do things in this country, right? It's funny because we're kind of, so you wouldn't have this perspective that I do, but we're kind of taught to avoid that, to avoid even highlighting the notion that the culture is even, that the cultural differences even exist, right? Like, we're supposed to sort of gloss over that.
That's very unique here. It's so, for example, in Venezuela, they've gone through some terrible times in the last few years. But next time that you see the Venezuelan soccer team playing, count how many players or Venezuelans in the stands, even when they play in the United States, are on their knees. Nobody. If the Venezuelan national anthem is playing, every single Venezuelan is going to stand up.
Right.
In Mexico, we've also gone through some terrible governments. Terrible atrocities against our citizens.
Sure.
Of the worst kind, much worse than what the complaints here are about. Much worse, without any doubt. And I don't think there would be a single Mexican that wouldn't stand up with full of pride when our anthem is being played.
Yeah.
What is very unique in the United States, and this is very unique, almost, it's almost the only country in the world where this happens, where there is an immediate association between the government and the nation.
The country itself, right? Yeah.
Yes, so the national anthem and the flag in Mexico have nothing to do with the government. Regardless of whether the government of Mexico is ruled by a left party or a right party or a center party, or a dictator, a
Good
general,
or evil or whatever, right? Yeah.
The anthem is what brings us all together. What causes trouble as a foreigner is that certain people see the anthem and the flag as the embodiment of a particular political party or
right. Some regime, some establishment,
regime
right.
that they do not agree with.
Right.
Yeah,
you're right. That's true. We don't have this.
That is such an enormous mistake. That is, it is freedom of speech, but in a way, it's one of the last things. I mean, if the citizens of the country do not believe, if we cannot even agree that when that anthem is playing, everybody stands up and everybody is respectful, because there was someone in Vietnam or in Europe or in Japan or in the Middle East or in Central Asia who died really just trying to protect the most essential values of this state, then we're making something very, very wrong.
Yeah.
It should be unquestionable.
Right.
That there are certain elements, something that brings these people together. In every country there is a national hero that is never perfect, because no human being has ever been perfect. We're all subject of our times and our space.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So in Mexico, we have certain national heroes that if you read about them, you may think, oh, wow, and these are the national heroes?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they all have their flaws.
Yeah, sure.
So that is something very unique about America, that there is... we tend to pair the government with, let's say, the most sacred or the most foundational of all cultural elements, right? I don't think I've ever seen that.
Yeah, no, just to say the flag and the anthem have nothing to do with the government.
Nothing.
That kind of sums it up right there, right? It's not, and it's the country which also, like you said, it hasn't, everybody that ever did any, like you have the heroes, right? We have, the national heroes in this country for a long time. People always thought of the founders, the founding fathers, right? The founders of the country. And there's been a shift because it used to be. So when I was a little younger, when you were arguing about how something ought to be, right? With respect to government or society or whatever the thing was, right? You could say, well, the way it was originally designed, what the founders had in mind was this. And everybody agreed that whatever the founders had in mind, whatever the original plan was, everybody agreed that that was the right thing. What we disagreed about was our interpretation or our understanding of what that was.
Right.
That's what you would argue about.
Yes.
Because you would say, well, when they wrote the Second Amendment or whatever it was, this is what they meant. Excuse me. But or when they created the country, the system of government, this was the idea. So it used to be that everybody agreed that the original intent was the right thing, and what we argue about is how that original intent ought to be implemented or carried out, or the interpretation of it. Now what we have is we can't use that common baseline anymore because we have people who say, no. The original design was flawed. The original intent was bad. The execution was bad. And so therefore, we've never had that solid foundation. So it's useless to go back and say, well, to look at what we're doing now and to go back and say, well, we need to look at how it was designed because that was garbage, and we need to just design something new. And at that point, when you get to that point, your concept of the flag and the anthem has nothing to do with the government. It's the country. Nothing. But when we come to the point that we can't even agree anymore that the foundation was good, then then what is the country? Right?
Yes.
How do you
that
like
is,
you just cut the whole thing out from under it, right?
Yes. Yes, it's interesting. It's another characteristic is that people tend to follow or attend the church or the religion that matches their political principle.
Yes.
Not the other way around.
Yeah.
In almost any other country on earth, it's the other way around.
Right.
You have certain, let's say, transcendental or religious or moral views about human activity,
and that shapes how you
decide on a political party. But here I tend to see that a lot. I tend to see the people transitioning into different Christian denominations depending on who is the reverend or priest or leader who matches their political beliefs. It is fascinating. That is not the case anywhere else in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so this is what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to come back and do a part 2 because we just cracked open a whole new subject, which is why are we like that and how do we get that? And it makes me think of the fall of Rome. So because there were some similarities happening in Roman society at the time, right? And so but my timer says that we should wrap it up. So, Tony Manzur, thanks for making time and coming over to the. So we did a good job, right? We did a
beautiful studio, and it was a pleasure to be here with you, especially for the Cuba Libre.
Well, we can as soon as we stop this nonsense, we can make another one.
But fantastic!
All right, thanks.
Love it. Thank you.